Tupac was the one that was taking back the most from the tracks. He was like, man, I need some stuff like this for my album. And at this time, we didn't know who he was. You know, he wasn't rapping. He hadn't had a record out. He was just a guy who was carrying equipment around that time. And he was like, man, when I get my record deal, I'm coming to you to do my album. I want you to do my whole album, you know.
Peace, what's going down? It's DJ Payne 1 for BeatStars.com. I don't use the word legend lightly, but I am joined by a legend today, DJ Daryl, and I just want to welcome him and thank him for his time. What's going down, sir?
Oh, man, thank you for having me. Love BeatStars.
Okay, we're going to talk about that. First things first, these days you can make a beat on your mobile phone. You know what I'm saying? With free apps. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that wasn't possible. And in the 90s, production was difficult and more expensive. There were more barriers. When did you start producing, and what inspired you to start making beats in spite of all those barriers?
My first record I produced was in 1988. You know, I was a DJ first. You know, I DJ'd all my high school events and all the neighborhood events. And I kind of got well known from DJing. You know, if I was DJing a party and somebody else was doing a party, it was like, I'm not going to that party, I'm going to one DJ Daryl doing, you know, because I had like a little show going on. But, you know, after a while, you DJ for so long, you start getting, I won't say bored, but you start experimenting with different things. So some friends of mine brought an 808 to one of my little DJing outside performances, and I just was blown away with how the drum machine worked. And from there, I just started making beats.
What was one of the first pieces of gear that you picked up?
The first drum machine I ever had was a 808. The guy that brought me the 808, he was trying to sell it. You know, he actually was he made music for Timex Social Club. And he was trying to sell it. You know, he needed to make money for some rent. I bought it from him. And I didn't get right into the keyboards. So what happened was the guys from my neighborhood who were hustlers, you know, everybody around that time, I don't know if you know, I'm from Oakland. And around that time, everybody that was in the street life was trying to get into the music business. So they was putting money behind rappers and trying to invest their money. So I had some guys that put money behind me because they figured making music was also a big part of what was going to take place in the industry. So I had a guy buy me everything I needed, keyboards and drum. He bought me stuff I didn't even know I needed. And I pretty much had the best of everything. And are you familiar with Bill Summers from Summers Heat?
Yeah, somewhat.
I mean, he's an older artist, but he made, you know, anyway, he turned me on to an SB1200 back in 89. He turned me on to the SB1200. And I bought two of them. I made everything I produced throughout the 90s. I used the SB1200.
So now in the age of the digital audio workstation, what have you started using?
I started when I first got into it. I was working with Reasons. I had a recording studio that I lost. Somebody stole everything out of my studio, so I had to start over. So I got into Pro Tools real heavy. So now I make music on Pro Tools. I use Pro Tools 12.7, and I use a little bit of Machine. I use Machine for like drums, but for the most part, it's all Pro Tools.
Okay, so rewinding back, you started off in a group called 415 with the legendary rapper Richie Rich. What did you have to go through at that time to not only record an entire record, but get signed to a major label, which is what you did back then? The
same guys that put the money behind me with the equipment, they also put me and Rich in the studio. That's how I met Rich. You know, it's a long story on how we actually came together, but I'll just sum it up real quick. You know, me and Rich, I was his DJ, he was a rapper, so we started working together, and we worked out at a studio called Starlight Studios, and it's in Richmond, California. We just kind of clicked. You know, we clicked, and the record that we put out, it was on a cassette tape, and it just kind of swept through the streets of Oakland. You know, this is all independent record stuff. We was doing it on an independent level. You know, the distributor at the time was City Hall Records. We pressed up our own cassettes, took them down to City Hall, and they just kind of went crazy. And then Rich wanted to start the group 415, and then we added a third member, which was D-Lo. And then that went crazy. So to answer your question, we kind of just, our music kind of regulated the streets. You know, the songs that were on the album that we produced, they were just going crazy, and it kind of started a whole culture trend in Oakland. You know, one of the songs we had was called Sideshow, and the Sideshow was a little thing that the hustlers used to do. And once the record came out talking about the Sideshow, that just kind of went all over the Bay Area. Everybody wanted to see what the Sideshow was about, and here today is a whole thing that's kind of has gone over all over the United States. Started with that song that Rich produced, Sideshow, or he wrote and I produced.
So do you have a sense of pride now, being an originator of the Oakland sound, seeing how universal that sound is?
In a way, you know, what it is, you know, a lot of the younger generation that's doing music from the Bay Area, excuse me, they're now using the sound that I came out with. And some of them know that I'm the originator of the sound, and some of them don't. And so it's like a bittersweet thing, you know. On one hand, I feel a little pride about it, but I feel a little disappointed because I don't really get the recognition for the sound that I kind of created from what they're using right now. And you know how you can hear some music and you can say, hey, that sound like me. That sound like something I did it, you know. So I hear that a lot coming from Northern California.
So fast forwarding a bit from the 80s, you actually produced an entire album with Tupac. That's not something that that many musicians can say. How did you even form that chemistry with him to the point where you and him created an entire body of work?
It goes back to me and Rich and the group 415. So the studio that we record, you got to remember, rather, back then it was a big deal to be recording in a recording studio. You know, it's not like how it is now. You know, you got kids now, they got a little studio set up on their computer. They can make music, great music right out of their bedroom. But back then you had to have a lot of money to actually go to the recording studio and record. So like I was saying, I had a lot of street money behind me. So the studio that we were recording at, there were only two groups recording in the studio. We was doing like studio blockouts. So it was 415 and Digital Underground. And Digital Underground, you know, they were signed to the majors, and we were working on street music. So when we're leaving the studio, they're coming in. So one session we was wrapping up, you know how you leave the studio, you playing some tracks from what you had did that whole day. And Tupac was with, you know, he's coming in with the rest of the Digital Underground group. And you know, we're playing tracks. We playing a few tracks with Shot G, and Tupac was the one that was taken back the most from the tracks. He was like, man, I need some stuff like this for my album. And at this time, we didn't know who he was. You know, he wasn't rapping. He hadn't had a record out. He was just a guy who was carrying equipment around that time. But he kept talking about, he was making a big deal about how great the music was and how he wanted his music to be on that level. And he was like, man, when I get my record deal, I'm coming to you to do my album. I want you to do my whole album, you know. And I didn't do his first album, but the second album, which was Troublesome 21, we produced. And what happened, the situation with Ice-T and Warner Brothers, I don't know if you're familiar with Ice-T having an issue with the song Cop Killers.
Yep.
With his body count. So that song caused a lot of chaos throughout Warner Brothers. And, you know, Warner Brothers was the label that was the mother label for all the other smaller labels. And they almost shut down their whole music department behind that record. You know, they got so many problems. They were losing stock in the company and whatnot. So they kept the music department open. Told Tupac to go back in the studio and record some records that wasn't so kill the police and F the police and, you know, just so rebellious to what was going on because of the situation they had just dealt with Ice-T. So, yeah, it was in the scope. So we came back to the studio. We went back to the studio and he came up with Strictly For My Niggas album. And one of the songs from the actual album that I produced, the Troublesome 21 album, he took one song and put towards the new album, Strictly for My Nigga, and another song on the flip side of I Get Around. And the song I did for Strictly for My Niggas was Keep Your Head Up. So the rest of those songs just kind of sat. It just kind of sat dormant until he died. You know, when he died, you know, everybody started scrambling for a Tupac record. And I just happened to have a whole album just sitting. So they took some songs and applied it to albums over here and a song over to that album and a song over to this album, you know, and it just got all confusing and mixed up. They was giving some of the credit to Johnny J for some of my production and letting people remix some of my stuff. Or Jazzy Faye remixed some stuff on my song, and Scott Storch remixed the song. So it was just crazy, you know. And you know, right now my wife, she's our attorney. We're working on trying to get all that stuff organized and situated now, still to this day.
So you can re-release it.
So I can re-release it and remix my own stuff.
Wow, that sounds like a mess.
Yeah, it is. And not to add, and to add to it, you know, they just had a big fire in
2008.
2008. They had a big fire that burnt up a lot of masters.
All the masters for Tupac.
For Tupac.
Wow.
Tupac, Eminem, and Cent.
There's a lot of artists.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of artists, but those are just a few names, you know, that was mentioned. And they just brought this up. Was it this year? This year. Yeah, it got leaked this year, but it happened in 2008.
At Universal Studios.
At Universal Studios, they had a big fire and lost a lot of masters, and I know my songs are caught up in a lot of that, so that's going to be even more messier, or it might be easier. We'll see.
There's no issue with keeping your head up.
Yeah, Keep Your Head Up is fine though. I've been living off of that since '93.
Was that a record that you produced with the SP?
Yes, all through the '90s, from the day that I bought my two SP 1200s, all the way up to I say maybe 2001.
Because it's got that sound. It's like when you hear the 12-bit sound of the SP 1200, you just automatically associate that with the golden era of hip hop.
Yeah. And you know, people would come to my studio and be shocked, be like, "This is all you have?" I had that and a keyboard, a couple modules, but it's one specific keyboard I use is called a JD800. I think it's by Yamaha. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it's the Yamaha. But I use that, or Roland, might have been Roland. I used that for forever, and I made a lot of great records with it. You know, I've always had my one foot in the major side of the music industry and one side of the independent side. So I did a lot of independent records that did really well here in Northern California in the streets, and you know, a lot of the artists they made a lot of money independent from off the records I produced. You know, Messy Marv and Sibo, Juice, and artists on that level, and it got me the attention to getting over to No Limit. And then I became a part of Beats by the Pound.
That's a great segue, because I feel like No Limit, it just seems to all of us as consumers, because I wasn't making music at that point, it seemed to all of us consuming the music that their model was drastically different from how previous major labels had operated.
Well, you know what Master P did, he followed the blueprint on what most of the Bay Area artists already knew. See, Master P was from New Orleans, and he came from New Orleans to the Bay Area, and he kind of learned the game on, you know, how to sell records in an independent way. So, excuse me, he just used that blueprint and just took it with him, and he advanced it a little bit, because what we know on the independent level to do with records, we know how to market a little bit and know how to promote, but the problem is a lot of guys don't like to take a lot of money doing that. You know, they like to take the smallest amount of money to promote a record to get the biggest outcome of it that they can. But Master P, he knew whatever you do in one city, do that in other key cities that are real big on his type of music, and that's what he did, and it really worked for him. And I made a lot of money at No Limit Records. I think I probably made the most money I've ever made in music working with No Limit Records.
I mean, yeah, you were with No Limit right around its peak, and you produced everything from the title track to Mystical's Unpredictable album to a whole lot of other records. What did that No Limit contract involve with your signing to Beats by the Pound?
It's funny you asked that. When I came over there, the other members of Beats by the Pound, they were kind of set into their situation over there, and when I came over there, first of all, it took me like maybe 4 hours before me and Master P could come to an agreement on the actual contract, because he was asking for things that didn't, that he wasn't really entitled to get. He was trying to get more percentage of my publishing, and I was like, why? You're already getting you're gonna have your own publisher. So I had to fight for that, but what he did, he gave me a bunch of money. It was for 2 years. It was a 2-year contract, 2-year with an option. And I didn't go over there because everybody else over there was doing they was working like 24 hours a day. They was just making beat after beat after beat after beat. And I couldn't understand that. I was like, I'm not going to do that. You let me know what albums you got coming out. I'll make a beat or two for that particular album. I can't just burn myself out like that, and that's what they were over there doing. And I tried to talk to a few of them about it. I talked to KLC, and I was talking to them. I found out that those guys were getting paid based on how many tracks they made for a project. So it was my situation was so much different from theirs. I was used to working a certain way as opposed to how they were working. So it was a lot different, and the record that I came over there with, because initially I was trying to get a production deal with Priority Records for a group that I had. And they told me that their hands were tied. They couldn't do the deal. But Master P was in the building, and that he knew I was in the building. So I have to tell you the story so you can understand a little bit of it. So I met Master P through a mutual friend of ours. His name was Freddie T. Smith. And he had an independent label where he was producing records for Marvelous and Sibo. They were artists from Sacramento. And they did really good records. I produced a lot of records for them, and they did really well. So, very short, T introduced me to Master P. Master P wanted some music from me, and he had me come to the studio. I brought 4 tracks on a CD. And he liked all the tracks, but he only had enough money to pay for one. But he wanted all of them, so we came to an agreement. I told him, you take all of them, you just pay me, or hook me up whenever you get a chance. Long story short, I sold records. He knew I was there during the time I was trying to get a production deal, and that's when he basically repaid me for those 4 tracks.
Every time I blinked, it was like there was a new No Limit album out, and I wondered about that. I wondered what kind of output the producers had to be creating for that to even be possible. But you kind of answered that question. Correct me if I'm wrong. The records that I heard, you started creating fewer sample-based beats around that time, or is that not the case?
Coming from out of the DJ world, I listened to a lot of records, and around that time, it was a big deal to sample a record. And it wasn't that big of a deal if you sampled a record because it was always considered a scratch, and it wasn't really no real, I guess you could say, laws in place for it at the time for sampling. And then when people realized, hey, that's my record, and they making money off of my record, and all that sampling laws and stuff started coming into place. So yeah, the copyright infringement stuff started coming into place. So I had to start leaning away from it. And Keep Your Head Up was the one that really made me realize that, because, I learned so much about when you use a sample, whatever the cost of the sample being cleared comes out of the production cost from the producer's end. So I started, let me get more into messing with this keyboard and learning how to mess with the keys and making music. So I learned how to, if I was dealing with independent artists, okay, I can just remake something because they're not going to go national with it. It's just going to be like a local record. But if I'm dealing with the majors, I'm going to do original stuff. And that I got that from doing Richie Rich's solo project, because we did a demo and got him a deal over at Def Jam. So the records I had to do for him had to be more original. So yeah, I had to get out of that sampling, and I had to grow more and more. Which is the reason why I'm rocking with BeatStars, because you gotta stay with what's rolling. You gotta stay with what's going if you be in this music industry. You can't sit still and be in the same lane that you've been in forever.
Yeah, I think a lot of us went through that that process with the whole beat licensing. What was your first reaction to seeing the emergence of the online beat licensing business?
It took a minute for me to understand it. Me and my wife, we both was learning at the same time, and we just kind of was feeling our way through it. So, it took me a minute to adjust to it, because I had people saying, "Hey, email me a beat, email me a beat," and I didn't come from that era. I come from the era where you sit down in the studio with the artist and you guys kind of build a beat together and build a song together from that. So when people telling me to email them a beat, it was like, how did you do that? Because I'm not, I'm not. So I'm looking at it like, if I make a beat and I give it to you, and then you take that beat and go do your own thing with it, I didn't produce the song. You pretty much produced the song. All I did was make the beat. So it was confusing to me. I'm like, I'm not a beat maker. I don't know how to. I mean, I could do it, but I've done that, and the artists take my beat and they do some things with it that I didn't really. I was like, why did he do that? And he didn't say that right, and he should have said it like this. So I didn't produce the record. They produced it, and they did their own thing with it. And then they'll say, song so and so produced by DJ Daryl, and then people look at me like, damn, DJ Daryl let that go like that, and that's just not how I would have let the record go. You see what I'm saying?
So, what led you to choose BeatStars as the platform for licensing beats? Then
I'm looking at it like it's a good networking thing. Like here I am talking with you, and I've been listening to your music ever since Eastman did something to it. I'm like, this dude right here is dope, and I've been just following you. I've been checking you out on YouTube, and I'm like, I didn't even really use with BeatStars, or I didn't really pay attention to it. I don't know what brought me to BeatStars.
I don't either, because you told me about it.
I told my wife about it, but I just was doing a lot of research, and I'm just trying to find ways to promote my music and get my sound out, and I came across you guys, and I'm like, this is a good little site right here, and it keeps me up to date on what people are doing, how many producers and beat makers are out there, what's hot, what people feeling, what they're not feeling, because I have 2 mixtapes out right now, and I put those mixtapes out before I was aware of BeatStars. I kind of wish I would have waited, because of what I did was I call it going fishing. I just throw a bunch of stuff out there to see how people going to bite, and I could have did that. I could have took all those tracks that I put on my mixtape and put it on you guys' site to see how that would have worked. But
you have more music.
I have a lot more stuff going on. My wife in the background trying to tell me everything to
And tell him, make sure he edits me out.
No, I'm not gonna edit her out. I'm gonna add her name to the title.
Yeah, she's the truth, man. She keeps everything together. I couldn't try to do music and try to handle the business the way it's being handled with us. She's been the best, running the business. Yeah.
Thanks, DJ Payne.
Yeah, she's the truth.
I'm gonna need an autograph from him.
Yeah, she really likes you.
We'll trade. We'll trade.
Production.
No, wow, I appreciate that. Okay, so I want to respect your time, but last big question: given that you've survived through all these eras of the music business, do you think producers today are better off or worse off than they were, say, in the 90s?
They're better off without a doubt, because, like I said, in the 90s, everybody couldn't do what's being done today. Everybody couldn't get their hands on equipment, and they couldn't get the sound. Even if they had the equipment, they couldn't get the sound quality. They couldn't do half the things that they're doing right now. You got to, I come from the era where you had to record on 2-inch reel-to-reel, and those reel-to-reel tapes by themselves was expensive, and they only held 3 songs. So if you wanted to do a whole album, you had to buy like 4 or 5 of them to do a whole album. And today's producer can make tons of music I mean, just you can pick any one producer on you guys' website. Tune, for example, got tons of music on there. You know, you couldn't do that back in my era. It was impossible. And plus get the sound quality that you have today. You know, I would make a beat and record it right onto a CD and give it to Richie Rich, and he would go in the studio and write to it. And then we would have to come back to the studio. I have to bring all my drum machine, keyboard, and equipment and all that stuff, or my ADATs and transfer it over, or whatever the case was. It was just a lot of work involved back then. As now, all you got to do is bring a flash drive and just rap it because it's already mixed and everything. So it's a bigger, better opportunity for producers today. I think the only problem is just so many now. It's saturated. So you have to do something to stand out a little better, you know. And it's up to that producer to find out what it is he or she has to do, because now you got females producing. You didn't have that back in the day as well. They have to find out what it is they need to do to stand out above the next man or the next woman. So.
Okay, so last question then. How do people find your beats online? How do they follow you on social media? Stay updated with DJ Daryl.
Well, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Just DJ Daryl.
No. You're on
So DJ Daryl is 415 and Facebook is 415?
Yeah, that's because I can't get DJ Daryl because somebody else just has DJ Daryl.
Okay, so those two are DJ Daryl 415. And Instagram is just DJ Daryl.
And BeatStars is just DJ Daryl.
And BeatStars. So now you guys, they can find me with you guys. So
BeatStars.com/DJ Daryl is where to find beats. Once again, I appreciate your time so much. Appreciate you sharing that insight and wisdom with the producer community.
I appreciate you having me on, man. It's a big honor.